Welcome to Spoilers Intended, a podcast about series, novels, and films. For this episode, Disney decided to take a sprint, rely on a flint, and hoped for gold's glint, and perhaps a story that shall imprint. That's right, we're talking Disney's Treasure Planet. Hey everybody, welcome to the show. I'm Stephen Ford, joined as always by Andrew Knuckles.
Hello.
And Joel Killingsworth.
Hello.
Little theft going on here.
As I say hello and I stare directly into Joel's eyes.
It was not a loving stare. I can assure you of that. But anyways, before we dive into Treasure Planet, and I feel like there would be better illusions there if it was Treasure Island, but there aren't because swimming in space is weird. Don't do that.
It's soupy space.
Soupy space. Yes, that's true. Soupy space.
Nice,
breathable space.
Nice and warm.
Nice and warm. Yes, also
and breathable
and radiation free. Anyways, for a little bit of discussion before we dive in there, we are going to talk about something that popped up amongst us having a different discussion.
Well, no. This is on topic with Treasure Island or Treasure Planet. What
it is. It's on message. It is on message. It came up as a result of that.
Yeah.
But it did pop up for various reasons. Joel can blame himself for this. But we are going to talk about our favorite romance. And for the definition of romance we're using, I'm going to let Andrew jump in.
Okay. So there are essentially, I'm going to say, two general terms for romance. We have romance with love interests and emotions, and emotions kind of are both of these, but kissy things,
Yeah.
Then we have romance of being on the open sea, going the expanse of space, experiencing things,
Exploration, adventure. You want to give us the definition
Yes.
we're working off of?
So here is the definition of romance that we'll be using for our picks this week. In the strictest academic terms, a romance is a narrative genre in literature that involves a mysterious, adventurous, or spiritual storyline where the focus is on a quest that involves bravery and strong values, not always a love interest.
Right. So we're kind of trying to narrow that down a little bit.
Yep.
But
narrow it down a little bit, which is
it's
like
a really broad definition.
You could fit a lot of types of films in this because, a lot of films have heroes that have bravery and strong values and mystery and adventure.
Yeah, exactly. So I think just to kick us off, because you are all in on this, I'm going to let Andrew start.
I love romantic films. I love thinking about, being
I'm going to clip just that little bit out and then give Andrew like a top 10 rom-com list and post that.
Hey, I love rom-com films too.
I do too.
Romance anime and drama is some of my all-time favorite. I pretty much that's what I live off of when I watch that kind of stuff. So, okay. The idea of being on the bow of the ship while you're going crashing through the waves or being on a grand space adventure.
Right. Yeah.
That's just what
that's what you want.
I eat that up.
Yeah.
So my pick this week has to be Fellowship of the Ring.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh,
I
okay.
feel
all right.
that so you have the bravery, which is Frodo and Sam trying to throw the ring into Mount Doom and make the trek there where they don't know the way. They have to have all these companions that come and help them. It's a very big, large adventure. And the thing that it's one of those places in the film where they've left Rivendell. And you have the massive sweeping shot of the entire Fellowship going over the crest of the hill, and they have the hero shots of every single character.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is like kind of the embodiment of romance.
He saw Orlando Bloom and was just like, oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh, romance.
No, man, it's all Viggo Mortensen.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Can't blame him.
Or maybe Sean Bean.
Yeah.
No argument.
But there's something about the film, especially whenever they're doing, and this happens in the other like Two Towers and Return of the King, where they have the big sweeping shots, and you can feel the film
Yeah, I
and
mean,
you can feel the adventure that they're going on.
Yeah, I mean, it was a New Zealand tourism shot gone crazy. So yeah,
I mean, sure, that's fair.
I mean, going to New Zealand, I'm all in, right?
Yeah.
That is your romantic trip of the wild sweeping vistas and all this others. Oh yeah,
Yeah. So that's kind of my quintessential when I think of like a romance film, of just kind of like where I'm kind of going with it. Normally, you could also say something, like Treasure Island or Treasure Planet. Wow, we're here.
Hey,
Look
what do you
at that.
know? Go figure. It
Yep.
just plays right together. And I've been trying so hard to not make like Frodo and Sam jokes with this definition. I'm trying to stay strong. I'm going to stay strong.
Okay, so Stephen, you are next.
All right. So
Why is Steven next?
Because you have a protest choice. You've already told us, and you're going to go last, and you're going to have to defend it.
And I'm going to like it.
anyways, so my example is one that only 2/3 of this group have seen, and
Okay.
the other third needs to see, and it's Luca.
Okay.
Luca is so Pixar was on Disney Plus only streaming. It is a romance.
I know why you picked this one. Because I'm shaky on this definition and Andrew hasn't seen it, so we can't dispute you.
Yes. Well, no, it's not that you can't dispute me. It's that neither of you were going to pick it. I was totally safe over here, and I was pretty sure I was safe over there. But it is a modern example of a romantic piece that you don't always see as much. It was a really big thing. It was like a huge genre for a long time. You don't always see it as much now. And the whole ideal, the whole quest is for a Vespa. And the romantic
I know a series
idealization
where they can find some.
But well, that just dated when the episode took
Kind
place.
of. You never know.
Pretty close. Anyways, but their whole quest and this idealization of what life is like with a Vespa,
Uh-huh.
and it's two boys who aren't great on an understanding of Italian culture or like a marketing ploy. Basically, they're falling for the marketing of what life is like. Lifestyle marketing of having a Vespa.
Yeah, gotcha.
And they're all in, but they have no means to purchase it, no way. So then it's a question of what do they do, what hurdles they overcome, and how does that grow and strain, et cetera, the friendship involved. And I mean, it's a really fun, really lighthearted, really cute movie at its core. But I love the, and it's very over the top idealization of the object and the realization of their quest. Because I think especially like when you were a young kid, the way they visualize what life would be like with that is the way that a lot of kids see it, especially when it maybe, oh gosh, I don't want to make myself sound like a really old person, but maybe in an era where there was less instant gratification as well. You had to mail in the box tops for the beanie topper hat or whatever, and it takes like 6 weeks for that to get there, and then 6 weeks for it to come. I'm referencing a Calvin and Hobbes.
Yeah.
Clip. And it takes 6 weeks for it to get back there, and then it finally arrives, and then it's really the test of, well, does whatever you have idealized, does that live up to what this is? And of course, with this story, it being the quest and the adventure, it's ultimately, it's not about the goal, it's about the friends we make along the way. Right?
Yeah.
So that's my pitch for a modern romance.
Okay.
Joel,
Okay.
I'm so
I
interested.
really want to know what this is.
So I'm going with a nearly 20-year-old film that
That's
is,
not 2000.
That's
Don't
like
do that to me.
2000s.
yeah,
Don't say that.
released in 2004, and it has been somewhat lost to the obscurity of time.
Okay.
And it
Did
is
say Equilibrium.
no, it is Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow.
Oh no, that's a very romantic film.
Okay. So that's a safe pick because I've never seen it. Couldn't take it from you.
But so like it's a pre-World War II alternate history Earth kind of setting
This
where
has Jude Law in it,
Yeah,
and Angelina Jolie.
and Gwyneth Paltrow.
It had a big
yeah.
name cast. I mean, this was it did not do well at the box office. If I remember
No, it
correctly.
didn't.
But the idea is that you've got this essentially world that revolves around. It has a lot of kind of advanced technology, not quite steampunk in aesthetic, but steampunk in like what the technology can do.
Like
It's
realization.
Yeah.
aeropunk.
Right.
And
What?
yeah, so everything's based around planes and
Yeah.
blimps
Aero
and stuff like that.
Oh, that. I sorry.
Not-
ARROW.
yeah.
I was like, how do you power everything with a bow? That makes no sense.
You just had this guy in the back just shooting
arrows.
right into the engine over and over.
Like, we have some bizarre magic system to explore here.
But anyway, so Jude Law's character is like the captain of this paramilitary mercenary group.
Okay.
And he gets involved in a mystery that ends up being kind of a mad scientist is going to destroy the world kind of stakes.
Right.
And then goes on a journey around the whole world trying to catch up to the bad guys and find the things before the bad guys do and ultimately thwart their plans.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean that's actually a very romantic film. That's not a protest film.
It was a
at all.
protest film at all because it's actually not great. Like it's not a great film.
It does, the movie does not have to be good for you to enjoy it.
No, but like it's actually really
It's very
interesting. It's really interesting from like experiencing it like from the cinematography perspective because the whole thing is like sepia tone and just
Yeah.
a little like the focus around the edges is always really soft.
Yeah, it's a very aesthetic film.
Right. And so it's like you're looking at photographs of the 1940s.
Yeah, which I thought was such a
in
cool
film form. And so that's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. That kind of reminds me of we kind of mentioned it at the Spider-Man episode, but Pleasantville is similar to that, where they have pretty much the first half of the film is all in black and white, and very similar to like the filming techniques and everything that they used. And then as the film progresses, color gets introduced into the world, and then that's
cool.
kind of their allegory for being different or being open, free thinking. Blah,
Right.
blah,
Yeah.
blah.
Change from the norm.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, up until that point, and similar to like WandaVision, whenever they went through all the different eras of time throughout the series for TV, where they had obviously like Bewitched, and then they you went over to the next one, which I think was like
Well, you started with Dick Van Dyke Show actually, and then you went to Bewitched.
yeah.
But you moved across the eras of black and white into color.
into that filming style,
and they had the kind of that slow introduction of color until it finally just all hit.
yeah. But no, Sky Captain World Tour is great. I haven't watched it probably since it came out.
I've never seen it.
Yeah,
but
I think it's been like I watched it in theaters when it came out, and I don't think I've seen it since.
Yeah,
but I mean, there are. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
Well, I was just going to say that it's a very teenage boy's idea of going on an adventure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is the not the definition with teens, but like that is pretty much the definition of what romance is the ideal of an adventure is kind of where it's at.
Well, I mean, that has ultimately kind of morphed into the young adult fiction that we see today, where you have this kind of romantic adventure. They just also happen to add the romance in with a love interest or three. Because
everyone has to pick best girl or best boy, whatever.
Yeah, you got to make a tough choice between two perfect ideals of something, and you got to make one. Yeah, that's how life is, right?
Exactly how it works.
Yeah, I think talking about romantic, especially films, but also books to some extent, because if the specific thing that they are romancing really speaks to you, then it's really easy to overcome and say, well, okay, yeah, it's for most people it's probably not a very good movie, but for you, perfect. This was the right amount of whimsy or the right amount of dream that you wanted, and it's yours. Take it, run with it. Right?
Yeah, there's never anything wrong about enjoying something that is not necessarily the best movie or TV show or book or whatever. Enjoy it. Who cares?
I love plenty of bad movies.
Oh, I love so many bad films.
Okay, I know you consume garbage on a regular
anime
basis.
all the time.
Like a raccoon over here. He's just in the trash.
But that's the thing, though, is you'll never know it's good or bad until you watch it.
And that's very fair. That's a very fair assessment. Or until
or if you like it. Yeah, or I guess whatever. Okay, moving on.
Moving forward. So, into the point of this episode, we're talking about Treasure Planet, and it is time for Joel to do a little math and give me a composite score.
All right.
For Treasure Planet.
So, among the three of us, using our rubrics and enhanced mental capacities, because we have them,
Sure. Why
Okay.
not?
I guess.
You're struggling with.
I have no idea where
I don't
that
know.
came
I don't
from.
know where he's going here either.
And no one should ever recommend me as an enhancer.
Mental, whatever he
whatever he just
used.
said.
He was staring directly at me the whole time. I was like, "Don't do this to me, Joel. I don't know what you're talking about."
I can't help you. You are going to a place I cannot follow. Anyway,
There's your Star Wars.
we looked at this and we said that deserves a 7.8 out of 10.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I contributed 1/3 of this, and I agree.
I agree. There were rubrics involved.
There
Yes,
are rubrics involved. For reference, for those of you at home, we grade a film or TV series on four pillars of review. Spectacle, which is in this case going to be heavily reliant on the animation, but the overall feel, the
action, the general production value and hype of the movie.
a lot of it's the things that make you say wow,
Yeah.
or go oh, or they elicit big reactions out of you, mostly visually.
Yeah.
The performance. So we're looking at the cast, how well they did, how well they matched what their expectations were. Did they rise up to the material? Did they bring it down with them?
Yeah.
Right. The score, so music, and then the plot, which is where we go to punch holes in anything we feel and see fit to do.
The plot is always the punching bag, essentially.
It's not always the lowest, but it's never the highest.
It's never. Yeah, it's very rarely the highest.
Honestly, that's a good point. Spectacle and performance are often probably our highest marks across.
I feel like those are the easiest to nail, though, right? Like when you're in a visual medium and you are hyper focused on what are the actors doing and how are we representing that concisely on screen, then those categories are really where most of your attention are going into.
I actually would be interested to see if we could ever find a film that could have a perfect 10 for a plot.
Perfect plot.
Ooh, that's hard.
Or a movie, TV, doesn't matter. Just
we may have to think about that. But if you at home have a film or TV series that you think is a 10, you can join us in our Discord. Let us know, and we will take a look and maybe even give it a review and see how badly we can dash your dreams and hopes.
well, see, then we just take that as a challenge.
Be like,
Well,
we're going to find something wrong with it.
Be sneaky. Don't say this is a 10. Just say, hey, you should review this. And then we might just be like, whoa, it's really good. You never know. You never know.
Okay, so
anyways, moving forward.
Yeah, you can continue with your bad synopsis of Treasure Planet.
Oh, bad synopsis of Treasure Planet.
We're doing a bad synopsis now?
I mean, just
we weren't
whatever
even doing a synopsis.
His synopsises are even good.
Okay, go read the novel Treasure Island. It's roughly that.
And then watch an episode of Star Trek, but when they're on the holodeck.
Yeah.
And you're good.
There we go. All right. So we troubled youth Jim Hawkins finds a treasure map, or is given a treasure map from a dying spacer
turtle.
Who
it's
a turtle spacer. the only descriptor used of the character is salamander.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
Said that old salamander. Anyway, so he gets this, and immediately pirates attack his mother's inn, presumably trying to get it. The salamander said, "Keep this away from the cyborg." Right. And so then Jim figures out how to open the map. It's got some sort of like locking system on it.
Fiddly bits.
Rubik's
and
Cube.
A friend of the family decides to, based on the map and the treasure to which it potentially leads, he decides to finance an expedition to go to Treasure Planet. That's the name of the movie.
Hey, what do you know?
And
I should have knocked a point off just for that.
And so then they go on a spacefaring adventure, which the whole texture of the film is very much, seafaring, tall sailing ships, but in space, right? So like there's not there are some elements of where you're like, okay, this is like space technology, but most of it is very much seafaring technology that they just put in space.
Yeah.
And I have to say that is maybe one of my favorite. Gosh, Master and Commander ruined me. I was gonna say that. Just the whole, it's not steampunk, but it's this high tech, but it's still very obviously a sailing vessel.
Yeah.
Love that aesthetic.
It's sailing punk.
So long as it doesn't require dudes in the back with a
bow and arrow.
Yeah. It's better than arrow punk, okay?
Apparently. it depends on which part of the English language you want to believe that the word is. Anyways, so I guess I kind of kicked it off there with my whole going off about.
We gave
books.
it a 7.8.
Yeah, gave it a 7.8.
We clearly enjoyed it.
Pretty good rating. Comparable with others.
Yeah,
not naming names. But again, heavily weighted towards the sailing, and then they kind of transform the concept of boats, but it's in space, but it's still blatantly up. You could put this boat.
It's soupy space.
It could land in water and it would be fine because what it's going through is water.
Yes.
Star Wars space. And I think the execution of that shift, because, Treasure Island at its core, it's a sailing.
Yeah.
So it translates well. I mean, that's what they're going for. Right? They're looking for that twist, and ends up being a really beautiful movie, honestly.
Yeah.
Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of on the same lines. I read Treasure Island when I was a kid, and I've been, not going to say intimately familiar with the story, as I've grown up. I've probably been 25 years since I've watched a movie or a film or read a book, that was Treasure Island. But, I'm still, it's one of those kind of stories that you grow up, especially as a young boy, that you just kind of absorb it, I guess. And partially maybe because, that's where a lot of my romantic visions of, sailing on ships or going into space, and it's just that same kind of sense of adventure has always kind of spurned from. And this movie scratches that itch. It was a lot of fun. There were, the CGI actually still holds up pretty well from, 2002 when it came out.
And the animation as a whole really holds up.
And they actually made a couple really good changes in the film compared to the book that actually kind of elevated some of the plot elements that may have been a little bit outdated.
Yeah, it's definitely a more character-centric and relationship-centric look at the classic story.
Yeah. And overall, I mean, it was just a really fun movie. I'm sad that whenever it came out, it just didn't do very well in the box office. So, I guess Disney decided that it just didn't need to exist anymore. And that's, how it goes. Joel?
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's really, it shows what you can do with transposing stories into different settings.
Yeah.
Because while they still maintained these are definitely sailing ships, they
very much so.
They did reskin everything. There are aliens all over the place. The only two characters in the whole film are human, right?
Yeah.
And
you see, yeah.
And so they get to have a lot of fun with playing with those and how that affects interactions between characters.
Yeah.
And how that affects the kinds of action sequences you might have, because different aliens have different physical capabilities. And there's, they have, like I mentioned, really lean more into the relationship side of the story. And it really allows you to focus in on the main character as a coming of age story where he's overcoming real problems.
Yeah.
As opposed to it being solely a grand adventure.
Yeah.
I think that really deepens it.
Yeah, because the original book is really just an adventure that Jim Hawking just kind of gets brought into, and then that's kind of it. There's no, I mean, there is some character development, but mostly a couple of decisions at the end of the book just don't really make sense in the sense of what happened in the book. And some of the changes, that they made for the movie was actually really nice.
Well, as we head into the intermission next, we're preparing to dig all the way to the centroid of the mechanism, where the spoilers lie. If that doesn't sound like your cup of juice, this is your chance to get off the boat. But before you go, if you like what you heard, you can support us at patreon.com/spoilersintendedpodcast. If you decide to stick around, welcome to the crew. Now on with the show.
Alrighty, and that wraps up the intermission. Hope everyone enjoyed a quick little break. We are back, and we have brought the spoilers. So be warned, we are well and truly past it.
Yar. Yar.
No sea of serpents, just spoilers. So we're going to jump.
Yar.
Oh no, we have truly descended into madness. They opened the box of Yars. Yar.
It's the yard.
Are we seeing St. Elmo's fire? Okay, apparently that was completely
gotta
lost
stare
on
at
you for
blankly for that one.
It's from Moby Dick.
Don't care.
Ah, God.
Don't care.
It's a green light that
I know exactly what that is. I just don't. I don't.
Wow.
I'm not here to deal with St. Elmo's fire. Which is, it's also a movie, isn't it?
I have no idea about that one.
See, now we just got way off base. Anyways,
Isn't St. Elmo's fire just the meme with Elmo going, like with his arms extended to the heavens and the fire burning behind him?
Okay, we are really falling down now.
That's Aeropunk, and this is Aeropunk.
Oh, stop. Oh, gosh. Anyways, Treasure Planet. It's a movie. We all watched it.
We enjoyed it.
Yes.
7.8 total. So there has to be some pretty decent scores in here. And I think we're going to find a couple pretty early. So kicking it off. Spectacle.
Yep.
I'm going to go to me. I really didn't know who to go with. So I went with me. So I gave it a 9.
What is the definition of spectacle for our
It's a 9. That's the
our
definition.
viewers, readers, listeners?
9. It's the things that make you go, wow. In this case, it's going to be the animation. It's mostly visual impact.
Mm-hmm. And this movie actually had quite
a bit. Yeah, a lot more than I remembered, honestly. But really and truly, ultimately, it's kind of that wow factor.
Yeah.
Things that really amp up and make it sell it, in this case, as a visual medium. So like the animation here.
Yeah.
So going into that, the animation was great. It held up really well for, we're talking an almost 20-year-old movie.
Yeah.
That it got a good budget from Disney. It was one of Disney's, lost pieces of animation.
Of film that kind of happened between essentially like 98 to 2004-ish.
Just say Pixar.
Yeah.
Yeah. But basically it got pushed off to the side and it's been gathering dust because it didn't do as well as they hoped. And it's a little surprising actually that it doesn't, or that it didn't. Because, Treasure Island is a classic, literally a literary classic.
Yeah.
And by definition.
It's kind of, and you would think with a source that old and that tried and true, like what to expect going into it, that it would be a lot easier for them to like transpose it into something that would be, that people will enjoy, like Lion King, which is Hamlet.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So again, animation was great. The CGI, there are a couple of moments of CGI where it's a little, that's okay. Yeah, it's a long time ago. A little questionable at times. But for the most part, especially, again, we went into this talking about, the romance aspect. And its visual depiction of their form of space travel looked awesome.
Yeah.
Just frankly, gorgeous at all turns.
Well, I loved whenever they opened up the sails and like the solar sails start kind of like pulsing with the energy from the sun or
the solar collection. Yeah. Little touches like that were great. The look and feel of the tech.
Yeah.
While sometimes maybe had kind of a weird, it's like a reverse anachronistic feel.
Yeah, where it's like we have all this super high technology. Guess what? Your lifelines are going to be rope.
Yeah.
Plain old rope.
But sometimes when you're playing with kind of these it's a punk, or it's kind of like a half breed.
Is it an Aeropunk?
No, stop. It's not hard sci-fi. They're not setting out to say this is hard sci-fi, but it's also not steampunk. It's just some kind of cross of that.
Yeah.
And there are some things that fall in the gaps in there, and that's a little weird, and we'll get into that a little later.
Well, that's kind of like more in the plot.
Yeah, so we'll get into that a little later.
But aesthetically, it's really amazing.
Aesthetically gorgeous. And every set, everything that is put on that screen looks good. Looks way better than I remembered, honestly. And that's just, to me, I think that was what really stood out to me. There's a couple moments, the CGI a little questionable, but on the whole, the animators really enjoyed what they were doing and really put a lot of color and life into it.
Yeah.
Andrew?
Yeah. So I gave it a 7 on Spectacle.
Ooh.
Well,
bit of flaw. That's fine.
So I'd never seen this movie before we decided to review it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I never watched it in theaters. I just never got around to watching it, basically.
Spoilers, nobody else saw it in theaters, including me.
Wow. Okay, so the reason why I gave it a 7 was there were a decent amount of instances where, like, so the character designs are actually pretty fantastic. Like, especially for all the aliens. Silver is just so cool. Like, they did such a good job with realizing kind of like the cyborg, peg leg and an arm, and then he's got the eye, and it's kind of the whole package. And he really fits that kind of, like the big cook pirate guy. And then you have, Jim Hawking. He's just a dude. He's just, kind of like the stand-in for the young adult that would be reading the book or watching the movie. And you can tell that they spent so much time kind of crafting this universe that has all these like really diverse characters with aliens that have all these like weird features and everything. And it really fits the style that they went for the animation. And then you kind of get to Jim and his mom, and there are a lot of like frames and scenes where they're like, they just don't really fit the model, just because like, so whenever I see an alien on screen, I'm like, well, that's just what the alien looks like. That is, whatever it is. But whenever I see a human on screen,
like, I know what a human should look like.
I know what you should look like, and you don't really look like that.
Yeah.
And there's a couple scenes where they just kind of go off model, where they just, they just kind of eyes are looking in two different directions, or their eyes are a little bit too far apart from their head. And that to me just kind of took me out a couple times, where like otherwise a decent scene would be kind of ruined from that. But even then, that's super nitpicky, and no one besides me is probably going to notice it. But
I didn't.
Yeah, I mean, well, and that's the thing too, is I watch a ton of anime, and I make note whenever characters go off model, because they probably didn't have the budget for that, or whatever. The only other thing that I really didn't necessarily enjoy was the depiction of a fully CGI Ben whenever they get to Treasure Planet. And it's a little uncanny valley with him, like, kind of just being able to do whatever, like bend however he needs to, and all these other kind of like weird mechanical things, with a fully CGI character paired with a bunch of hand-drawn characters.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you have a straight up comparison right in front of you, just because he's interacting with all the hand-drawn elements.
Yeah. But beyond that, like, I totally agree. Like, the CGI actually holds up really well. And the whales looked a little weird, but
a little,
it's very hard for, especially early CGI, to replicate kind of like organic skin.
Yeah.
And like, even now it's still hard.
Yeah. I mean, even now, metallics are probably the easiest, or like earthy.
Well, and Ben still looked good. He just didn't. I just don't think he fit into his scenes very well.
He didn't mesh.
So what did you think, Joel?
Well, Steven, you gave it a 9. Andrew, you gave it a 7. I went right in the middle, gave it an 8.
Yep. Okay.
And the CGI, while like kind of in a vacuum, seems to hold up pretty well. Like it didn't age poorly. It takes me out a little bit every time that the CGI was blatantly interacting with the 2D animation, just because like the motion is not synced. Because like when you're especially when you're panning the camera through the 3D space that you have designed in your CGI environment, and then you're putting animated characters in that, they're just they don't move the same way.
Yeah. Right. Well, it's tough to pair a camera, like a 3D camera, and then essentially a flat cell, and create perspective in there while making it look like he's moving through this 3D scene.
Yeah. And they did a lot of that because the entire ship is CGI. And so having the animated characters move through that when the camera was still, when I say camera, but when the frame is still, is one thing. But then when you're trying to have these sweeping shots, it really, you can start to see the kind of the seams part a little bit.
Yeah.
Between the two different types of fabrics being woven together. In addition to that, this is a pet peeve, but I'm going to bring it up. This is a sci-fi trope that I really despise, that they leaned into real hard. And that is naming something familiar so that you know instantly what it is, but also naming it from X place you don't know to make it sound exotic.
Alien exotic.
So like Ithilian blood pairs, right?
Yeah.
Like this is the kind of thing that you'd see in Star Trek all the time, and it's here all over the place.
Yes.
and it really annoys me. Like that's not what they call it there. Call it the same name that they call it there.
I don't know. I mean, maybe they call them ethylene blood pairs in some weird third person world that they just talk out of character all the time. You don't know this. They're aliens.
Okay.
Yeah, you know how they work.
Yeah.
I know how they work.
Oh.
I know how
We've got
they
an
work.
expert over
Heard
here.
it here first,
Expert.
ladies and gentlemen.
No, but like this is something that's fairly common in sci-fi, or at least maybe not so much recently, but in like the 90s and early 2000s.
Oh yeah, no, I mean
sci-fi.
it's just always there.
Yeah.
And it's kind of really more like a soft sci-fi
Mhm.
Mhm.
where
it's more of a setting.
right. They want to use a term, but they don't really want to take the time to explain it. Whereas hard sci-fi is going to tell you why this exists and how it evolved,
Yeah.
etc. So
Yeah, the difference between, Dune and Star Wars.
yes, big time.
Man, you can't even call Star Wars soft sci-fi.
No, it's just fantasy.
It's just fantasy.
Fantasy.
Yeah.
Dune and Star Trek though. That's more of
Okay,
the
yeah,
thing.
there we go.
Yeah.
Fine,
Yeah,
fine.
there. Yeah, that's a little better. No, we got a quota. Name it up again. Moving on. Time to talk performance, and we're gonna go reverse order from last time. So Joel,
All right, taking it away. I liked how that 8 felt for spectacle,
Yeah.
and so I'm gonna use it again.
Okay.
He likes the way an 8 looks.
I've got an 8
very
for,
symmetrical.
it's got like a circle, and it's got like another circle.
And circles are perfect.
They're-
So
they're
that's doubly perfect.
Mwah. And so
There's a band named after that.
There
so
it is.
this is 2 perfect circles. So we have a performance score of 8 from me. I felt that Silver really carried the show.
He did.
His performance was spectacular. He was terrifying when he needed to be terrifying. He was like sort of sweet and smarmy and mock innocent when he needed to be.
Mhm.
And then he was really heartfelt. You could tell that he was really growing to love Jim
Yeah.
and not only see himself in Jim, but see how much more potential Jim had than even he did.
hmm
And to really take him under his wing and encourage him to develop that, but all the while knowing that he has this obsession that has consumed his life that
He has to fulfill.
and he knows he's going to sacrifice Jim to do it.
hmm
Right up until the moment where he realizes that Jim has now eclipsed this lifelong dream of his, and he chooses to save Jim instead of getting the treasure.
Yeah.
And really the whole movie is about Jim and Jim coming to overcome the damage that his father leaving
Mhm.
at a young age did to his
Right.
self-worth.
hmm
But like while that's true, and that's what the show's about, it's really Silver is the actor in all of that.
Yeah.
And so his performance being spot on, I think, was really the reason why the movie rings true.
So for me, I gave it a 7, and basically the same kind of glowing remarks that Joel said. Silver essentially carried the film,
Mhm.
and I really loved the captain.
Yes.
She was just super fun,
Yeah.
and she had such a good that the British dry wit.
Let me try to make this as monosyllabic as possible.
Yeah. No, she's got some great one-liners.
And,
Yeah.
and that's Emma Thompson.
Emma Thompson. Yeah.
Mhm.
And she's been in a ton of films, like over, so many films. And she always does such a good just that kind of like sarcastic
Mhm.
kind of feeling. And she did such a fantastic job with that for this film, especially whenever she was talking to Mr. Arrow, because you could tell that they had this kind of secondhand understanding of kind of what each one was saying, even though like whatever she was saying was actually kind of rude.
Mhm.
And he's just brushes right off of him. He's just like, I don't care, let's go.
Yeah.
The only thing that I really detracted from me was unfortunately, because Jim is essentially the stand-in for a lot of like the viewers,
Mhm.
he kind of falls a little bit flat with a good portion of his early part of the film, and then
Yeah.
once it gets more to the emotional sections, then he Joseph Gordon-Levitt, I was going to
Yes.
say Jason for whatever reason, whenever he finally gets to kind of strut his acting skills or voice acting skills, then it starts kind of to show through, especially towards the end whenever he is finally confronting Silver about his betrayal.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it was still, I mean, like everyone did a really good job, and yeah, I enjoyed it, and Silver is still probably the standout character, I think.
Yeah.
Outside the Doctor, but I'll give Steven that because I know he likes the Doctor.
Yes. All right. So last time we went around in a circle and we did a 9, a 7, and an 8. And this time we've gone around the circle. We've done an 8 and a 7. So I'm going to give it a 9 because symmetry, people, symmetry is important, by God. So yeah, I mean, a lot of the points that have already been made here. Obviously Emma Thompson as Captain Amelia.
Yep.
Who I had to look up because I could not. I just other than just the captain.
I'm not sure.
I had it
Was
here.
her name said?
I
More maybe like the
Maybe-
scene in which she was introduced,
Yeah.
and then other than that is just Captain.
I actually had her down here as Captain Amelia, and I didn't even look at my notes
Mhm.
because that's me. So,
but like you said, Dr. Doppler. So that's David Hyde Pierce.
Yep.
And honestly, going back through the IMDb, it's like there's a lot of pretty well-known names that they had here to do this. And I can see why there was a budget and some expectations of return.
Mhm.
But the Doctor in particular really jumped out.
mhm.
He had a couple of great lines, and it ultimately it boiled down to the interaction not between him and Jim, because Jim, the Doctor doesn't understand Jim, and he bores Jim.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Jim is bored with him, and it's true throughout. That's why, in a lot of ways, why Flint is kind of not Flint. Long John Silver is kind of the surrogate father that Doppler is not,
Mhm.
basically.
Mhm.
However, you have a lot of really great interactions between Captain Amelia and Doppler,
Mhm.
which I really liked because, again, maybe this is part of why you're saying, you look at Jim and say, well, it just falls flat. It's just a human. I know what a human looks like. Because a lot of the alien personalities were able to be just immediately read because that's how they look.
Yeah.
You know, Mr. Arrow is
Big, burly.
stalwart, reliable, strong as a rock, right?
Yeah.
He's a rock.
Yeah.
He's just a talking rock. Big, burly rock. Captain Amelia, quick-witted, really sharp cat.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Dr. Doppler's a dog.
Yeah, and he looks, kind of like the goofy or Snoopy kind of like
Right.
styling.
He definitely has kind of some goofy to
Yeah.
him just in general. But the way that the two of them interacted, because it's kind of like, we have, the going at it like cats and dogs here,
Right.
Mhm.
where they're, don't necessarily get along, and kind of their path throughout was kind of fun.
Yeah.
And of course he gets, the best line of probably the whole movie. I'm not going to say it here because it has a word that we try to avoid. Or can I say it?
I don't.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, I know what you're saying. Maybe.
It's a play on Star Trek.
Yeah. Dang it, Jim.
Dang it, Jim.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a doctor. Well, I'm not a doctor. Well, I am a doctor, but I'm not that kind of doctor.
I have a doctorate.
It's not the same. When you have a doctor, you help people. When you have a doctorate, you're just useless.
Yeah.
Well, also just because at that point, it really kind of sells him out, because up to this point, he's felt very comfortable in his world and who he is.
Mhm.
And now he's been thoroughly put out of his element. And if he was actually a doctor and not a doctorate, he could be useful there, but he feels useless here.
Yeah.
Well, and they foreshadow that too with like the scene where they go to the spaceport and he just walks out and he's in this ridiculous looking spacesuit, right?
Yeah.
And he just talks about how he got overwhelmed and flustered dealing with the saleswoman who was pushing the purchase on him, right? And like you already know right there that he's not going to
very
be a
savvy.
reliable actor.
Right. Well, he's
In
not
most
going to
situations.
be calm, cool, and collected.
Yeah.
Right. Unlike someone like, say, Long John Silver is always going to project and control,
Mhm.
Mhm.
which I think the big swing for me with him in terms of how well he was played is the bits when they are in the galley. And so for reasons, Jim ends up in the bucket,
Mhm.
the barrel. It's a barrel, not a bucket.
It's a bucket.
The
bigger bucket.
barrel
It's a
of
barrel.
perps. This one, I'll hand it to him. They weren't purple Australian lemons or whatever. They were just perps, which is a shortening of purple because they were just purple lemons.
Purple objects.
Right.
But he ends up in the barrel, and you get to see the full swing because you've seen Silver be very, friendly and fatherly towards Jim,
Mhm.
right? And then in this meeting, where Silver's kind of taking out some of his frustration with the rest of his crew within the crew. You know, you get to really see the villainy side of him. And then once, you know, the scene progresses and Jim gets his chance to get out of the barrel, but he doesn't get out of the galley before he encounters Silver coming back. And then you really get, because in both the first two scenes, Silver's being very honest. And in that scene, he is being very false. He's trying to force the, oh, yo, you know, Jim, oh. And it falls really flat, especially because Jim is, you know, wise to him, right?
Yeah.
And I think that swing and the way that falsehood landed was just really, really well done by, and it's really done by the actors at the end of the day. I mean, you can animate whatever you want to on that, but that kind of interaction has to come through in the voice, or it just doesn't work. Yeah. And so that to me, that really impressed me. That really put it high up. Yeah. And just such good stuff all throughout. So.
And just one, we completely didn't even talk about him, but Martin Short as Ben, despite my misgivings of how he is animated, he did a fantastic job as this kind of zany, manic kind of, you know, robot that's lost his mind, which, you know, in the book, he is an insane person. And he does the rambling really well. And he just does a really good job at being that kind kind of character.
Yeah. I mean, that's a very high energy thing to do.
Yeah.
All the time. Talking to a microphone.
Yeah.
Like, oof. Okay. Well, I think we're ready to push forward into our score. And I'm going to let Andrew start this one.
Okay. So I gave score an 8. You know, honestly, like I couldn't really think, like, I couldn't really pick out like a specific song that, or like movement that really like elevated scenes more than what they already were. And it definitely helped that the visuals really paired quite well with like this vast kind of, you know, grand adventure style of music that they've kind of paired with the movie. And honestly, it was just really good. It was everything kind of, you know, hit pretty well. The only thing that didn't do it for me was the montage song, which was I'm assuming Goo Goo Dolls.
Those Goo Goo Dolls, yeah.
And it to me, it just really dates it for like crystallizes it in the 2002 range of, ooh man, we were really emo back then, weren't we? And you know, it just, you know, that just kind of took me out of the movie like almost immediately, when this should be a pretty good like character building moment for Jim and Silver.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna jump on there and say I also gave it an 8. So at the end of the day, we arrived at the same conclusion through a slightly different path. I was very conflicted on the Goo Goo Dolls song during the montage, because yes, it dates it, and yes, I'm not a huge fan of the song, but also yes, it carries your emotions through the montage, and yes, it agrees with all of the emotions that the characters are experiencing during the montage. So it emphatically does its job, and so I can't 100% fault it, right? Even though it's not my favorite.
Yeah.
But in addition to that, I thought that the main title theme of the film was really fantastic, really, really snappy, really sweeping in a way that you know this is going to be a grand adventure.
Yeah.
And particularly when they don't drop it on you right at the beginning, because right at the beginning you have young Jim reading the story of Treasure Planet, right? But then they have the really fantastic animated transition of seeing his profile under the blanket as he's, you know, reading the thing again when his mom told him to go to sleep, into exactly the same profile of you seeing him aged up a decade and riding his Solar Surfer, right?
Which was a fantastic sequence.
Yeah,
we didn't even mention.
They had a lot of really good transitions, you know, in the film.
That sequence was so fantastic. I also kind of wonder if a certain J.J. Abrams ripped kind of the idea and the sequence that goes
from
on
Star
there.
Trek.
Yeah, that for Star Trek. Yeah, for his version of Kirk. Because seeing that, I was like, you know, if you just put Beastie Boys on over this would basically be
the same.
And the way it resolves too with the cops and everything, like, this is basically the same scene.
Yeah. But anyway, so like he immediately goes into this dive, right, with the thing, and then you have him at the last second re-engage the engines, pull out of the dive, and then whoom, title sequence, and everything is exciting and adventure for a moment, and then he gets stopped by the cops.
Yeah,
Cops are always ruining everything.
Yeah.
But overall, I give the score an 8, and I think it really carried.
Yeah. So, for also different reasons, I have also somehow achieved perfect symmetry with an 8 on score. So me personally, I'm actually a pretty big Goo Goo Dolls fan. I mean, yes, it was the late 90s, the early 2000s. Emo was a thing. And to Joel's point as well, we're running this montage, which is at its base core very emotional.
Yeah.
And I think it fit for what it was. And it was written for that. It was not just they just pulled a random song off their catalog and said, hey, can we pay the licensing for it?
Like the dialogue for the song fit what was happening on screen and the emotions they were feeling.
Right.
I don't disagree there.
You just want that expressed differently.
Yeah.
That's totally fair. That's totally fair.
And I'm not a Goo Goo Dolls fan at all.
So for me it hits, and I've listened to that song on its own.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, I would agree with Joel that overall the score really has that big, grand, sweeping adventure feel.
Yeah.
And I think they really hit those notes well. They didn't always hit it when they could. I think there were some missed opportunities.
Mm-hmm. I felt at the end of the film, whenever they're going through like all of the kind of like the lava or like the laser beams and everything like that, I felt that there wasn't a lot there.
Right. Yeah.
It didn't have the beginning of the film but they also don't have as much going on, so you're going to notice the score a lot more.
Right. And that tends to be when a score really sells itself, right? Is in the quiet emotional moments. That's when you can really play it, unless you're just Zimmer banging on a shepherd tone. But overall, really good.
Yeah.
Really helped the movie far more than it ever really hurt it. Just sometimes it just wasn't always there. Or didn't, if it was there, it just could have been more there maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So moving forward onto everyone's favorite, it's the plot. And I'm going to take this one for myself.
Yeah, you need to start this time.
Yeah, why not? So I gave plot a 7. And for me, it's just kind of a known story.
Yeah.
And so it's hard. I think they did a good job of, giving Silver a little more meat to it than, the original story does or anything else. But it just, some elements in it, the mid, you need that, call it low level, but that mid arc tension for the characters to overcome before the actual real adventure is.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole random supernova into a black hole, into your lifeline is a piece of rope on a high
into a murderer of a crewmate.
Yeah, it was just, wow, this went up to like massively up to 11. For hard sci-fi.
Out of nowhere.
Yeah, but for hard sci-fi, here's a black hole. That's a big problem.
Yeah.
And for this, it just kind of was whatever. Obviously,
it's a whirlpool.
I mean, it's analogous to a bad storm on the open sea, right?
Like that's what they were looking for.
A hurricane came by. And
except this one's a supernova.
Right.
And, turns into a black hole.
Yeah. So, I mean, you could have had kind of the same effect, and maybe it was like, a buffeting of solar wind or something like that, where it's too much power. Because that's
right, but
the same idea as a storm in a ship, right? If this is solar power.
But like a storm is immediately iconically recognizable, right?
Right.
Too much wind without like the stormy elements of the clouds and the rain and stuff.
Out.
Right. And so you needed some sort of immediate iconic imagery in the space setting for you to latch onto and say, I have heard something like that before.
Right.
I recognize this is a problem.
But it was one of those moments where it was almost like a kind of a hacker trope where like, how do you solve the problem? You type faster.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of had that moment with the doctor.
Yeah.
Just spouting off astronomical terms, and then it just works or whatever. And you're just like, okay, that happened. It was a lot of tension, and it's going to affect the characters in ways, more so for some than others.
Yeah.
But it just didn't hit right. It didn't fit the way the rest of the movie really felt, I guess, until the very, climactic end, but that has its own energy, right?
Yeah.
So it felt easy for me to kind of ding a little bit, just because while within the relationships, they really, I think, improved the story, the actual overall flow of the story, I don't know that they really improved on anything that's been pretty well known.
Mm-hmm.
So I will kick it out. I'm going to open up the floor. One of y'all grab it.
Well, he'll go.
Yep. So
he pulled up his
Joel,
notebook.
Joel read his notebook first and drew faster.
fastest notebook in the West. I also gave the plot a 7.
Okay.
So there's plenty of things to ding. The first thing that comes up is, the Jim's mother's inn burns to the ground after Silver and his goons attack, and they barely escape. And all that they've got left is the map, right? And it's locked inside a puzzle box, essentially. And it's important that it is, because later they have to have a reason for Jim to be pulled along to go with
be
them,
the
right?
only reason he can be their guide.
Right, yeah. But the problem with that is that in order to enable this, what they did is they had Jim just luck into the correct combination in like 8 seconds.
Yeah, they didn't.
Right?
There was no real effort.
Good at
there.
doing a Rubik's cube. Okay,
But he didn't even know it was a Rubik's cube. Right? Like that's
No, I know.
Like it's one thing to say, okay, he's really gifted when it comes to spatial reasoning and mechanical thinking and all these things. Like, I mean, that they laid groundwork. I accept that.
Yeah.
But there's no like puzzle boxes operate on arbitrary rules, because it's whatever motions the designer wanted you to make.
Yeah.
Right. And he didn't even know it was a puzzle box. He just started randomly fiddling with it and it came apart.
Typical teenager.
I know, right? They'd break everything.
And so like that's a stretch, but we'll move beyond that. But then, in addition to playing fast and loose with astrophysics, which you do.
It's soupy space.
Soupy space. They can breathe in it. They need gravity, but they can breathe in it.
Yeah. So the part where they have the standoff, they've taken shelter in Ben's hut, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
And Silver can't really attack them because they've got a high ground position, and they can't get out because Silver's got them trapped. And so Silver gives them the ultimatum of, you do what I want, or I'll just use the ship's cannons and blast out your position.
Yeah.
And so Ben and Jim escape out kind of a secret entrance and steal the longboat that Silver and his men had.
Right.
And they go up to the ship and have an adventure and ultimately disable the ship's cannons.
Well,
is their goal.
Not just that goal. They don't actually have the map. The map is left on the the boat.
And so this all of this so far, great. But then they come back, presumably traversing the same path that they took to get here. And when they get back into the hut, they get ambushed by Silver and his men, whose camp they just went by and didn't notice was empty.
Yeah, that's fair.
So,
I mean, they could be looking the other way. I mean, I don't have any answer to that.
And neither did the film.
I mean, it's called a plot hole. It's sort of like a black hole in that you can't escape it.
They escaped this
Question
one
mark?
with explosions.
No, yeah,
You can escape plot holes with explosions.
it's true.
Okay, so
Michael Bay's done it.
all right. Anyways, so I gave plot a 7.
Consistent.
Wow, we suddenly settled into rigid consistency
So,
here.
I think I mean, like Steven said, it's a known story.
Yeah,
and I don't think just kind of like retreading Treasure Island is going to warrant this like a 10 or some massive kind of number. But what they did do to kind of alter the story to make it a little bit more interesting and add a little bit more emotional depth, we've already kind of talked about it a little bit, was essentially Silver getting redemption for kind of what he is. Because clearly he's bonded with Jim over the course of their voyage, and now he's kind of at a turning point of like, do I, I'm here for the treasure, but then I also care about Jim. And we finally see the everything kind of all collide, and then he obviously chooses Jim so he can save him and then get everyone out and escape this exploding planet. And what they had to do for that, to make that happen, is they had to make sure that Silver was not the one to kill Arrow, which happens in the book. He just like throws him overboard whenever Arrow's drunk. And
They redeemed Arrow too for this story.
Yeah.
So in the story, like Arrow is he's just kind of a bumbling buffoon, not a good first mate. And then obviously they went the exact opposite here, and Mr. Arrow is straight as an arrow, and
but not Arrow,
not Arrow punk. And
twang, twang, twang.
But so they have the clearly the actual bad guy, the little like praying mantis dude,
Mr. Scroop.
Yeah. They had him kill Arrow instead.
Yeah.
So now you still have the same story beat.
And it was a really great like mid second act kind of action beat for Jim to get to defeat him on the adventure up to the ship.
Yeah, so then you get the kind of justice where he fights him with the help of Ben unintentionally, because Ben is just throwing unplugging things,
and Morph, who may be the second best character out of the whole.
So that doesn't really talk.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing that I really liked about what they did with Morph was that this was kind of Disney's way of being able to fill in a lot of their comedic relief and their normal cartoony style in the form of Morph without really sacrificing anything from the story or the feel of the adventure.
Yeah, like the serious characters got to remain serious, but you still had this silliness on the side, but it made sense in the world because he's basically a parrot.
Yeah.
That's just an alien parrot.
That can, actually affect physics and stuff like that in his world, even whenever he clones. That like the science behind that is just so mind-bogglingly ridiculous.
He's made of flubber.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah. No, the like whack-a-mole with him was hilarious. But yeah, just the random, because like you said, he's the space parrot, except instead of parroting by repeating things, he parrots by imitating it in actual physical form.
Yeah.
Just smaller, miniature. But all of those little bits were good hits of kind of your chuckle to relieve the tension or to bleed off some of the emotions, because I mean ultimately without that, it's a really high emotional stakes movie for a kids movie basically.
Yeah, and it's you definitely need some kind of tension reliever throughout a lot of these scenes where, like, clearly after Arrow, they realize that Arrow is dead, and it is because the lifeline quotation marks failed, even though we know he was killed.
Hey, and props to them. They even made sure that it would land on Jim's fault.
Yeah.
Because if you leave the point where it was cut and you assume, oh, well, it broke, that's not Jim's fault. But by actually removing it off the belaying pin that it was strapped to, then it plainly lands and be able to point at his feet and say, well, it wasn't tied down properly.
Yeah. And because of that, you have one a realization for Jim that he is essentially unintentionally killed someone from his perspective at that moment.
I don't know that he necessarily believes that, because he even argues back that.
No, I mean,
he then has almost like a fit of despair where he's like, I was doing things right. Like,
I was doing so well.
I was doing so well, and then this is just more proof that I
can't do anything right.
I can't do anything right. I'm ultimately worthless. It's kind of that low point where after the character has been doing well, and you have a low point into that kind of leads into the rising action.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Well, and if you didn't have Morph in these scenes, it would just take the whole like tempo of the story down, because now you're at a very low point for Jim here, and you need some kind of comedic relief, but not in the sense of like someone like an actual character.
Also someone who behaves like, say, Ben, because Ben is his own form of comedic relief, but it's the kind that would not fit that scene at all.
Yeah, that would actually
tone deaf.
It would actually undercut a lot of the tension there, as opposed to gently relieve it. Another thing that they did with Morph that was really interesting was Morph was a stand-in for other characters to talk to when it didn't make any sense for them to actually speak to another character.
Yeah. Right.
So that you could have them explaining their desires and emotional states and intentions via dialogue, which is pretty much the best way to do it. But you didn't have to explain why they would be telling that to another character, because they're just talking to this pet.
Yeah.
basically.
Well, and whenever Silver is kind of like going back and forth in his head about, like, I know I have to betray Jim,
Right.
but I obviously care for him. He's having this conversation essentially with himself, but he's just talking to Morph.
Yeah.
And Morph is still reacting to him, but but he can have a monologue without it just being a monologue.
A villain monologue for no reason. Yeah. And that's actually a really fair point. And they do make great use of that throughout. Do we have to give props to Dane Davis, who is credited as Morph's voice?
Oh, really?
I mean, it's the perfect kind of character for Alan Tudyk in his current acting career.
Yeah.
Because he's the chicken or the bird or whatever in everything.
But yeah, I mean, really the only knocks are just kind of everything we've already talked about for the plot wise. I mean, we kind of went off on a tangent with some character stuff, but I mean, honestly, I think it's probably, I'd probably say it's one of the best renditions of Treasure Island, the book.
I would say it is the best adaptation
of
Treasure Island, the book.
I don't know what other adaptations have existed beyond just like maybe one or two movies.
Y'all are like trying to get a rise out of me or something.
Yeah,
Muppet Treasure Island here.
Muppet Treasure Island.
Muppet
Treasure Island Silver was a joke compared to this.
Well, he doesn't have the same range of emotions because in a lot of ways it's maybe a more true adaptation of what Silver is like.
Because he like in the book he is unredeemable. He is an evil person that is only there for the money, and he doesn't.
Well, it's not even just there for the money, but it's also sort of he's pursuing his own twisted sense of justice because, like, this money he feels was denied him by Captain Flint. And he was part of Flint's crew, and he was owed it.
Yeah,
right.
So,
but I mean, back to the Muppet thing here. Yeah. you do also at least have the bit where you still stay true in that Silver is the one who gets Arrow off of the boat. Although it's not, he's still redeemable because it's not actually like permanent in the same sense. I don't want to, I realize we're past the spoiler wall for a version of Treasure Island, not a spoiler wall for all versions of Treasure Island, but they do find a way to make him still redeemable as a person without just being like, oh, well, I'm just black soul, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And they have their own little Muppet twists, et cetera. It's just mostly it's Tim Curry on being a villain. So it's hard to not love it. But no, I mean, Treasure Planet for being the animated version, if you will, with all of its little twists and whatnot, it's pretty great, which is really taking us into our final. Doesn't factor into the actual rating score, but we're talking faithfulness here.
I'm talking romance score. That's me.
Oh, romance score. Ooh, look out. Andrew, what you got?
I gave it a 9.
All right. I think we know the reasons why. We've been over it. I mean, it's pretty well follows the story beat for beat, minus giving Silver a little more.
Yeah.
Which ultimately probably helps the story.
I think so.
Yeah. I also gave it a 9.
The only note there would be they didn't do anything with the black spot, which makes me sad.
Right? And you know what? Muppet Treasure Island uses
Yeah.
Anyways.
Well, to follow the symmetry trend, I am also giving it a 9.
Okay.
And this doesn't really factor into the aggregate scoring. This is just how well does it represent the source material.
Right. Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And I was saying like I feel like the changes that they made really leaned into the spirit of the source material. And whenever an adaptation can do that, it's really good.
Right. Yeah. When you acknowledge it exists and then you push through it and make it better.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think the score, even though it doesn't reflect the final score or impact the final score, it can help some people maybe make a choice if they really like the idea of Treasure Island. And it's really faithful. Okay, well then you can kind of trust it. Or, hey, this is really original. They did a great job of being original for a flip side where we don't have something to lean back to. That's a different type of endorsement. So, but I believe that we are at the point where we have said everything we want to say.
We can set sail.
Oh, there we go.
Head to the supernova.
There we go. No, away from the supernova. That's not how.
No, it comes upon you like there's no way to know that it was going to happen, right? Like it's a surprise supernova.
There's no metrics.
The sails better already be set, is what you really say.
Yeah.
All right. Well, on that note, that is all the time we have for this episode. So until next time, I'm Steven.
I'm Andrew.
And I'm Joel.
And as always, every spoiler was intended.
Yar.
Yar. Yar.
Yar.
Thank you for tuning in. If you like what you heard, you can support the show for as low as $1 at patreon.com/spoilersintendedpodcast. We also have a Discord server and would love to have more people joining in the conversation. Links are in the description below. Thank you.